Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello, and a warm welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the programme that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and I'm looking forward to being with you for the next 30 minutes. On today's show, we'll be hearing from Stephanie Sargent, who shares the many ways she's felt being blind has blessed her. It's easy to dwell on the difficult aspects of blindness, not necessarily the blindness itself, especially if, like me and Stephanie, you've been blind from birth and it's simply your norm. But there are real barriers, limitations to employment opportunities, less access to books, and often needing to have audio-described films, people's assumptions or ignorance, and the challenges of getting out and about. All of this can lead to isolation and depression. It's important to acknowledge these realities and work to improve quality of life for blind and partially sighted people. But it's also important to recognise the positives. I rely on the Lord to help me with the smallest things, like when I've dropped something on the floor. And because I'm asking him for help, I have come to realise how involved he wants to be in my everyday life as a friend. Well, a few weeks ago on this programme, we heard from Stephanie Sargent about her encounter with angels. But today she's sharing something very different. The many ways she feels being blind has helped her, and in some cases given her an advantage. She sat down with Lynn Davies to share her story. Here's part one of their conversation.
Well, I was born the youngest of four, and we lived in the countryside in Lincolnshire. My dad was a vicar, and I had scarring all over half of my face as a baby that looked really awful. And Dad took me to someone who would pray, and after prayer, it all disappeared completely. And my atheist eye doctor thought it was a miracle, agreed it was a miracle. And my dad reckoned as God could heal that, but I didn't heal my eyes, then he would provide the strength and the grace instead, and that it would be okay with my blindness. And so that's the attitude I grew up with, that although it took me longer to really experience that firsthand from God. But then I realised if God could allow his own son to die on the cross so that we could be saved, then our blindness was wasn't a problem to him. It was something that he could incorporate into his plan for good, because it says in Romans 8, doesn't it? All things work together for good to those who love the Lord.
It's a very refreshing perspective, I think, because it's so easy, and I'm speaking from experience as well, to start whinging about everything that isn't working. Have you had moments where you thought in that way, and how do you snap out of it?
By yelling at God quite often. And he says, Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I say to God, well, look, it blooming well isn't at the moment. What do I do? Teach me how to find you in this, because I often find speaking in tongues helps me snap out of it. As you say, as I worship, then I find God's perspective on the situation and his peace. And I also find that quite a lot of the pain I experience in being blind is the misunderstanding and the loneliness it can engender, because people they avoid you, new people, until they realise you're a normal human being, can just ignore you. And Jesus experienced loneliness and misunderstanding in huge measure for totally different reasons, because he was the Son of God, not because he was blind. But also he would have, imagine the creator of the universe inhabiting a human body. He would have felt so restricted, and I can identify with that. So I've had a couple of people at least say that they really wanted to commit suicide, but they realized what God had done in my life, and it gave them hope. And as a church, the one I used to belong to, there were hundreds of people that we were able to help and give them a new lease of life. And as they found Jesus, they discovered that he'd got a plan for their lives as well. And they could experience his love in terms of caring for other people.
Because this is the thing, it's not so much always the thing that we have, it's not always the blindness or the disability or whatever that is the problem. Is very often, as you say, the misunderstanding and people not giving you a chance because
Yeah,
they are
yeah,
seeing the disability before they are seeing you.
yeah. And that's why I went self-employed in 2009 after being made redundant twice. And I've loved it since because I've I've been working with people who don't see blindness as a disadvantage. First, we developed a talking software that was free until NVDA took over, and then I'm working with Bristol Braille. I led the design team. Edward Rogers was keen that blind people would take part in the design of the Canute console. I spent hours taking it to America, Zambia, Germany, all over Britain to find out what people really want.
Some people might not know what a Canute console is. Can you explain what it is and describe it for the listeners?
It's a 9-line braille display rather than a one line. It was called the Canute because do you remember King Canute asked the waves to go back? They didn't actually, but we want to reverse the trend in braille is becoming less popular, and we wanted to reverse that trend by creating an affordable machine that would reverse that trend by making it easier to read braille. And having 9 lines rather than one line means that you can do two-dimensional data. We're creating train routes for maps which shows the spatial layout of all the different stations, a bit like the London Underground. And another guy is going to use it for networking for BT, and someone else is as a market trader using it to see from the graphs where the shares are going, where what the shares are doing, that kind of thing. So it opens up new opportunities for blind people.
Absolutely. And I went to see it as well at Bristol Braille last year, and I was very amazed at how I could read music, lyrics and music at the same time. It was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you.
We'll return to Steph and Lynn shortly. But if you'd like to know more about the Canute console Stephanie mentioned, you can get in touch with Bristol Braille at 0117 325 3022. That's 0117 325 3022. Or you can email enquiries@bristolbraille.org. Now, let's hear how Stephanie feels blindness has actually been an advantage in her travels.
And how do you feel that you have been able to encourage people in faith with your outlook? Because, as I mentioned earlier, it is a very refreshing outlook.
Well, there was a guy I met in Montreal who'd got a wooden leg, and we were being warned not to speak with our English accents in front of French people because we weren't very popular as English ones, I don't know what it's like now, but this was years ago. And he was willing to listen to me because he wanted to know why I wasn't bitter, because he was very bitter. And I explained it was because I could ask God for his love and show it to people. And there was, when we were evangelizing in Cardboard City, there was a homeless guy of 18 who was really upset because his parents were hippies and they'd never registered him at birth, and he was finding it really difficult to get back into the system because he didn't exist, if you see what I mean. And he said to me, well, you've obviously suffered, so I'll listen to you, but I won't listen to them lot. They don't know what it's like. And also, as blind, I find I'm not put off by people's outward appearance, and that's happened time and again. That I've found people who don't look as though they could be helpful to sighted people have been incredibly helpful to me when I've been out alone. And I think it brings out the best in people when I've met such lovely total strangers and made friends with some of them who've given me help when I've needed it. And and I really appreciate that. And I find when I travel on trains and there's time, people just share their life story with me, and I'm often able to pray with them and well, when they want me to, I mean, and just share about Jesus. Perhaps we'd never have got onto topics that were quite so real. They wouldn't, neither of us would have made ourselves quite that vulnerable to each other. I mean, there are loads of things that are far worse than being blind, and I think it makes you much more sensitive to people's suffering, or it can do.
You talk a lot about as well having to rely on Jesus in very different ways as a blind person. Can you share a little bit about that?
I find his friendship when I'm faced with misunderstanding or not being given a chance, like we were mentioning earlier, very, very consoling. And that I pray for opportunities, and he seems to open doors, that of various things that I can do, and like we constant. Well, I don't know about you, but I constantly lose things, and because I can't remember where I've put them, or someone else has moved them, things like that. Yeah. And so I ask God to show me where they are. And occasionally he'll give me wisdom pictures or at least keep me calm enough to actually explore properly until I find it rather than getting annoyed, things like that. And when I go out, particularly if I'm going to a rough area or somewhere that's more difficult than usual, I ask him to provide the right people to help me because there are some people that you really don't want to receive help from, you know what I mean? And he invariably he sends just the right person, and that I really appreciate that.
Have you got any sort of particular stories and examples that stands out to you when you have been maybe in rough areas or abroad or somewhere where you might not perhaps have felt as comfortable as you normally do, where the right person came along?
Just a few days ago, I managed to forget to take my long cane with me when I was free running my dog, and a guy in the park who's losing his sight, but not has still got he carries his cane to show he's blind rather than to really use it, if you know what I mean. And so he lent me his, and then I left it out. We arranged where he would pick it up from once I'd got home. So that was a real blessing, and I just need to remember to take it with me more often. And there was another time when three of us who were blind were in Frankfurt going to Sight City, and we arrived. Of course, we were winging it. We arrived at the hostel at 10 at night, and there was no food available. So one of them suggested we went to find a restaurant, and we were given. I think we must have found someone who gave us rough directions of how to get there. But of course, when three of you are in a foreign city, it's not that easy, especially when I was the only one with a smattering of German. And so we prayed, and just as we rounded the next corner, a guy came and was able to show us to a restaurant. They opened the kitchen because it was closed at 10, and cooked us the most I've never tasted them so good. What do you call them? Those schnitzels, is it? And we were so grateful, because what are the chances of that happening as well?
And now it's time for this week's reflection. Torch's head of church partnerships, Vicky Bryson, has been reflecting on how people in church settings are sometimes given nicknames based on their gifts. Here she is, talking to Nathan Thomas in Pure 24/7.
Well, thank you so much, Vicky. What have you got for us then for today's Breakfast Bite?
One of my favourite characters in the Bible.
Oh, very interesting.
Yes. So, if your church gave you a nickname, I wonder what it would be. maybe something related to your hospitality gifts, musical gifting, something about being a prayer warrior. Today, I'm going to think very briefly about a man we meet in the book of Acts called Joseph. We learn that he's a Levite from Cyprus, and the apostles have given him a nickname, which I think we might be more familiar with. He is known as Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. I've been looking at what the word encouragement means, and according to the Cambridge English Dictionary, encouragement is words or behaviour that give someone confidence to do something. What an amazing thing to be known for, being the person who sees good in others and helps them to become all that they can in Christ. I bet Barnabas would have been a really great person to be around and to have as part of your fellowship. There are several references to Barnabas in the book of Acts. I was looking this week at Acts 11, where he goes to Antioch and he encourages the believers. The first line about him is about what an encourager he is. He encourages them to keep going with what they're doing, to stay faithful to God. And we read in Acts that this encouragement helps that church in Antioch to keep growing. And later in the book of Acts, we read about his encouragement of John Mark. Even when John Mark gets things wrong, Barnabas still sees the good inside him. And he encourages John Mark not to give up, not to let those past mistakes define or limit his future. And I'm really struck by how amazing it is to meet people who are like Barnabas in our lives. So I've been wondering who those people might be for listeners out there. Who are the people that have seen a gift in you, encouraged you to keep going in your faith when it feels tough? Who are the people that said, have you given this a try? I've seen that you're really good at this. Is this a gift God's given you to use? And what ways that we can to say thank you to those people. I know in my life, there have been people who have been so encouraging of me and allowed me to take those steps that I never thought I'd be able to take without people saying, come on, you've got this. Keep trusting in God. God's got more for you. Keep going. And then I wonder, as Christians, who we could be Barnabas for today. We all know how good it feels to be encouraged, for people to see our gifts, to use their words, their actions to give us that confidence. I wonder who those people might be around us. People who might need encouragement to keep going. The people who we think, you're really good at this. Everyone else must have told you. But at the end of the day, usually everyone else hasn't told them. And you could be that first person to say, do you know, this is a real gift I see in you. And even those people who seem really confident, I wonder if just that word of, I loved what you did there. That was a great sermon. That was a great prayer leading, can make a difference. We might not always see that difference that we make, but how awesome is God that we plant these seeds of encouragement and God allows them to grow and grow and equips people to do so much more. So yeah, I've just been so struck by Barnabas and how amazing it is to see people who are like Barnabas and also to be like Barnabas as we encourage those around us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Vicky. That is, I think that's fantastic. Each one of us to think about, first of all, who in our lives has encouraged us to take bold steps. And like you say, actually, even those who might appear confident, each and every one of us, we're all human and we all have doubts, don't we? We all have questions and times we think, oh, am I any good at this? And without that affirmation, sometimes we can start to shrink back. But when somebody comes along and says, that was really great, it just gives us confidence to leap forward and go even further. So yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Vicky. It's been wonderful to hear from you today. Thank you for bringing us today's Breakfast Bite. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you, and you.
And if you'd like to hear more reflections from Pure 24/7, just go to YouTube and search for Breakfast Bites. I'm sorry to say we're all out of time for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this week's programme. We'll be back next week when we'll mark the first Sunday in Advent. And don't forget, if you're blind or partially sighted and would like to learn more about any of the services provided by Torch, including the Hope for All project, our chaplaincy service, accessible books and resources, or our various groups, our client services team would be very happy to speak with you. The number to call for information or to request a song is 01858 438 260. I'll give it you again, 01858 438 260. Or you can email info@torchtrust.org. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Torch Trust on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or YouTube. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reflections, and so until next week, from me, Marilyn, and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.